Sri Suktam is a sukta or a hymn to Goddess Sri or Lakshmi. Original structure of Sri Suktam is actually exactly 16 verses, which is same like 16 lunar phases, so it's somehow really significant in that way as well. And every verse has its own, let's say, aspect of Goddess Lakshmi presiding over it. So she says, when you, for example, chant the very beginning of Sri Suktam, Om Hiranyavarnam Harinim Suvarna Rajatasrajam, she says, you can find my names there, and they can be also used like a mantra. She says, you can also chant mantra Om Hiranyavarnaya Namaha. That's the first of the 53 names of Goddess Lakshmi. And what is like a really beautiful part of it is that then she actually goes on describing the deeper meaning of each of those names. So she says, I am Hiranyavarna, not because I give wealth or prosperity, but because when you are in deep meditation and you see the light in your heart chakra, this light of your consciousness, that's what I am. That's why even on Diwali, which is a day sacred to Goddess Lakshmi, we light the lamps, which is this beautiful way to symbolize the defeat of light over darkness as well. Defeat of light of true consciousness over the darkness of our own ignorance too. Then she goes on explaining her other names, which some of them are really beautiful. One of her names is, like I mentioned before, Ardra, the moist one. The goddess describes, it's because I am always moist with mercy for my devotees. I am ever merciful. One of her names is Chandra, which is like the moon. And she says that this is because when there is this pure consciousness that arises in a person after the consciousness is already still, after the great churning has been done in our sadhana, this pure consciousness that arises, as a result, it's also me.
Namaste, Achala Ji. How are you?
Namaste, Deepak Ji. Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you?
Perfect. I'm well as well. And so nice to see you again after about 5-6 months.
Likewise.
In the context of upcoming Navratri, we thought it would be a good idea to have a short, medium session on the Goddess Lakshmi and Sri Suktam. Last time also you shared your wisdom on the goddess, which was really appreciated by a lot of people, and we are hoping for another session today. Let's start with the Goddess Lakshmi herself. Who is she from the texts? How is she understood today? An overview of who Goddess Lakshmi is.
So I find actually Goddess Lakshmi to be so beautiful aspect of Divine Mother to talk about, because I do believe that she became somehow widely misunderstood in our times. And actually, she's not the only aspect of the divine that became widely misunderstood. I think that it's just but natural that as human consciousness is evolving through the yugas, we are in Kali Yuga right now, of course, when we take the grand calculation into the account. And as our consciousness somehow does deteriorate in some ways and becomes more materialistic, it's very natural that we project the same onto those very aspects of the divine that we pray to. And actually, the very first mention of Goddess Lakshmi, when she's called also Shri, the goddess of opulence and light, the very first verse of Sri Suktam actually describes her Om Hiranyavarnam Harinim Suvarna Rajatasrajam. And of course, we hear that with our mind that is so, full of the ideas of Kali Yuga. We hear that she's Hiranyavarna, she's golden complexioned. We hear that she's Suvarna Rajatasrajam, she's adorned with golden and silver lotuses. And what comes to our mind is, of course, the money, the wealth, the prosperity, right? Because that's how we associate those precious metals with. We associate them with prosperity, with wealth. But I think it goes even a little deeper than that, because if we think of the aspect of Divine Mother in general, the motherly figure, actually, we all learn in the very embrace of our mother for the first time in our lives how to feel safe in life, how to be protected, how to feel loved, which are so important qualities, even on spiritual path, to develop as the form of bhakti, feeling protected by the divine. But in our times, it is so that we actually kind of projected or misplaced this feeling of safety on external abundance and prosperity. In result, we don't feel any more safe right now or protected because we are the children of God. We feel safe if there is the right number on our bank account, right? and it truly is like that. And this is actually a really interesting phenomenon to observe, because when I look at Goddess Lakshmi and how she's described, even in this original hymn of Rig Veda, Sri Suktam, she's this goddess who grants us safety in all forms. Of course, she is also giver of material wealth, but she also grants us safety through surrounding us with beautiful things in life, creative things, love, affection that we get from our family, fulfillment also of our deepest spiritual desires, including the highest, deepest longing of the soul, which is just to reach the divine. And of course, she represents all of that all together. And somewhat, we got so fixated just on this idea of wealth, which really reminds me of a story. It's a very good story, actually. So this is actually a real thing. So once actually a guru asked their disciples, so if I tell you from today on that for every repetition of japa, every repetition of mantra, I'll pay you 1 rupee, let's say, or $1, whatever our currency is, will anything change in your devotion? And I think that without being, how to say, in any way insincere, for most of us, the answer is yes, of course, right? But it, of course, exposes our hypocrisy in some ways. It shows that how much easily we trust those material values rather than trusting the divine, which is the source of it all. Another such a paradox that my Gurudev Paramahansa Vishwananda often brings, which is fascinating to think about. Imagine, when it comes to safety itself, you decide to travel somewhere, you go into a taxi, you sit in a plane. You don't know who is the taxi driver, yet you somehow hope that he will get you to your destination. You don't interfere with his duty or tell him how to drive. You are just sitting in a taxi and patiently waiting to be taken to your destination. With a plane, even more, right? You don't even see the pilot. You don't even know if there's anyone there at all. And if the person is actually even skilled or in any way to do their duty, and yet you trust. And then when it comes to actually the true, let's say, driver of our lives, who is God himself, right? Like Krishna, who is driving the chariot of Arjuna, why it's so hard to believe that we are in good hands? Because, of course, we don't see. We are limited by our senses. And I think that actually Divine Mother is such a beautiful mediator in this context, because she helps us to feel her presence in daily life through her blessings, which are very tangible. Because as a mother, she's so understanding. She knows we have our material needs, we have the limitations of our minds. And as an ever-loving mother, she never judges us because of them. She tries to make us feel safe enough to feel that, yes, I'm ready to take the next step on my spiritual path and surrender, which I think is the most beautifully shown with the image of Lakshmi that appeared later. And that's Goddess Lakshmi, always represented at the feet of Lord Vishnu, right? Always in service. And this is really beautiful because sometimes people derive the meaning of the name of Goddess Lakshmi from the word Lakshya, which means to have the right goal, to have the right direction. And if we kind of see her story, how she comes into being, how she is described in either Srimad Bhagavatam or other Puranas, she, during this great churning of the ocean of milk, she emerges from the ocean with a beautiful garland of lotuses in her hands. And of course, she's ready to choose her husband. And she's not looking left and right, neither at the opulence of gods, neither at the opulence of demons. She goes straight to Lord Vishnu. She knows that the supreme is her actual goal, which is why in the tradition in which I come from, we actually see Goddess Lakshmi as this mother who teaches us this devotion, bhakti, how to be truly surrendered to God at every moment. And to be surrendered means also to be of service, to be available to serve not just God, but this entire creation as well. Because entire creation is her expansion, after all. So she's a very, for me personally, dear figure, and a very, I would say, special aspect of the divine that hides many, many more lessons than what we just see nowadays in pop culture, or in the media.
Yes, and I think a few things which you mentioned there is, uh, I mean, we have narrowly focused on the material wealth aspect, and it's very fascinating. I mean, even if we keep the same context that the mother goddess is giving us safety, that safety we don't want in her grace. We want it in terms of our bank account. Uh,
Yeah.
which is a very interesting turn of, I mean, how the contemporary mind is taking us in that direction, and solely in that direction. It's not as if some people are worshipping her as she is. It's like unanimously everybody is worshipping only the material aspect of the goddess. But if we had to look beyond material wealth, what should we look in Goddess Lakshmi for? I mean, which direction should we look in for her grace?
I think there are a couple of beautiful, really qualities that Goddess Lakshmi is embodying. And very often, actually, in the Bhakti tradition, it is believed that Goddess Lakshmi is actually the embodiment of one of the 9 forms of bhakti or devotion, which is called Padaseva Bhakti. And Padaseva Bhakti actually has many meanings. It can mean either a direct service to God, but it can also mean actually service to others in the form of karma yoga. Because how it's seen in the Bhakti tradition is that actually, like, where are the feet of God? Anyways, right? Like, they are everywhere. We are all at his feet, actually. We are all at his mercy. And by serving this entire creation and trying to make a situation for everyone a little bit better, of course, that is ultimately making mother happy. We can just try to imagine, how happy every mother is when her siblings are, when her children are happy, right? When the siblings are not fighting with each other, they are helping each other and loving each other. So that's one ways of the ways, of course, to honor her. But then there's this another really beautiful aspect. So when Goddess Lakshmi is at the feet of Sriman Narayana, she's pressing his feet always. And some acharyas have actually seen this very act of Goddess Lakshmi pressing the feet of the Lord as almost, the attempt to just kind of squeeze, his grace, basically speaking, out of him so that he's more merciful, so that he's more kind, so that he gives us his grace. But of course, the fascinating aspect of that is that whether it actually happens or it does not happen, it's on him. And I think that this is the reason why we prefer to pray to the goddess and pray to God for very well-defined material, let's say, goals and purposes, because it gives us a sense of control. It gives us a sense of almost like a transaction, like I go, I do the puja in Lakshmi temple, and therefore my son will get married, right? Or something like that. So it gives us a sense of agency, while we entirely kind of miss the fact that Goddess Lakshmi herself is this embodiment of something that we call Karpanya. It is actually one of the 6 angas of Sharanagati, or this pure surrender that devotee experiences. And Karpanya means to be helpless. And to be helpless doesn't mean to be weak, but just to accept that some aspects of life, including with the highest aspect, and that is whether God will actually ultimately give you grace or not, it's out of your hands. You can, of course, serve, you can show your love and your devotion and your bhakti, but that relationship of love between soul and God is not a transactional one. He will give his grace for sure to his devotee, but in which form he will give it, in which way, and in which time, that is something that we can't really, make happen. And this is why I believe, so much of this, how to say, transactional approach, to devotion and spirituality appeared in our times, because we just so desperately want to feel in control. We think that if we are in control, we will feel safer then. But if we look at that, the safest, being on earth is always the child, who is just safe in the embrace of mother and completely helpless, and completely having this like implicit trust that whenever I will be hungry, whenever I will be thirsty, whenever my nappy needs to be changed, my mother will take care of me. Even if I will get myself completely dirty, my mother will still love me and take care of me and wash me and embrace me. And that's so beautiful to actually try to develop that level of relationship with the divine. And I personally believe that this is the, let's say, dimension of spirituality that Goddess Lakshmi is actually trying to point us all towards.
I completely agree, Achala Ji. I think this transactional way of devotion is a disservice in multiple fronts, and I think it's also a disservice to our own self, because
Yes.
I, I mean, we are basically diluting our own faith and devotion. Apart from this pure transactional thing, if I do this, you will give me this. We are also in many, I mean, in an undertone of saying that you don't really know what I want, so you're not
Yes.
omnipresent and omnipotent. Let me tell you, this is what I want, and in case you forget, this is what I'm doing to get what I want. And just by this act of somehow grasping on and grabbing on to a seeming control, uh, I see that a lot of people really miss the core quality of devotion, which is to live freely, to live without stress, and it's a wonderful opportunity to let go of all your burdens. We don't want that. We actually want to keep all of our burdens and then say, okay, give me this one thing more. So no, I completely agree, and I think if we start taking this dimension of worshiping the goddess, uh, what I feel is we can gain much more than material wealth, because eventually that material wealth is also one step before we what we want is happiness and completeness and fullness, and
Yes.
we feel that getting that money will lead us to that, so why not directly short circuit to the end point is so what I feel. But before we move on to the next segment, Ashlaji, you mentioned a few forms of the goddess. Are there any more forms which come to your mind which you would like to just spend a couple of more minutes on?
Absolutely. Actually, Goddess Lakshmi herself, like so many aspects of Divine Mother, she has such a variety of forms. And in fact, even if we would look directly to the source text, Sri Sukta, there itself, even actually each of the verses is presided by one specific aspect of Goddess Lakshmi. Some is called, and some of them are not really even worshipped that much today and are very interesting in some ways, I believe. For example, there is called an aspect of Goddess Lakshmi, Amrita Lakshmi, the one who gives nectar, who gives actual bliss and happiness. I really loved, how you were speaking about it right now, that, why to get the medium first, the end to the goal, if we can just cut the chase and get to the goal, right? And get the bliss and happiness itself. And whenever I think, about how even the ancients arrived at this, let's say, aspect of Lakshmi, it probably may have come from that, Amrita Lakshmi, goddess of immortality, of bliss, of effortlessness in life, actually. Then other aspects of Lakshmi that we can see there specifically in Sri Sukta quite prominently will be one of the what we'll call later Ashtalakshmi forms or 8 forms of Lakshmi. And this most popular one is actually Gaja Lakshmi, where there are 2 elephants on her sides bathing her. Originally, actually, one of these elephants was Airavata, who is the carrier of Indra. So these are these divine elephants that were bathing the goddess. And she's even addressed in the last verses of Sri Sukta as being always Ardra, which means moist. And why is she moist? Because she's always wet with grace. It always like just flows through her. So for me, Lakshmi is really, this embodiment of this complete flow in life and just allowing ourselves to be bathed, to be purified, and to just receive as well. Because I believe that Goddess Lakshmi, as she's in so many forms, whichever form she takes, she's so often actually portrayed with these 2 simple mudras, in her hands, which is of course the Abhaya mudra in the right hand and the Varada mudra, right, in the lower hand. And I always see that, as some beautiful, let's say physical representation of also our own ability both to give and to receive, and to allow both of those things to happen effortlessly. And of course, another thing that is so prominent in iconography of Goddess Lakshmi that is seen in all her forms, she's almost always seated on a lotus flower. She carries usually 2 lotuses in her upper hands as well. And in Sri Sukta itself, she is described as having face like a lotus and then lotus eyes and lotus hands. So like lotus is really like quite a big thing of a metaphor when it comes to Goddess herself. And this in itself has actually so many dimensions. Even in Lakshmi Tantra, Goddess herself says, actually, I am seated on lotuses of your chakras. This is where I am really seated. That's the lotus. I'm seated in the lotus of your heart. Very often also lotus is being treated as embodiment of purity or sattva guna, because of course it's such a wonderful flower that it grows in so muddy waters. And even to grow it, it's not so easy because the seed is so hard, you need to actually manually break it. And only then it sprouts. But once it actually grows above the surface, it's first of all the most beautiful of all flowers. And then even if you try to, pour some dirt on it or water on it, it just slides down the petals and the leaves. And that in itself is a fascinating quality, which I believe really strongly inspired the ancients. That's why the eyes of so many deities, not just Goddess Lakshmi, are often compared to lotuses because their gaze is always pure. Like our gaze, our human gaze, unfortunately, is often very tainted. Like we were discussing in the beginning, right? We hear Goddess Lakshmi as the giver of wealth and prosperity. We taint it a little bit with our gaze, our expectations, and our projections. But the way God looks at us is always pure. It's full of love. There's no judgment to that. And I think that this lotus itself is such a really beautiful and unique metaphor here, because it's this purity on one side and also the beauty, of course, the fragrance. And Goddess Lakshmi is the goddess of beauty as well, which again, this is something so fascinating how it became actually objectified, in our times. The beauty is not anymore something for everyone to admire, It's become objectified and sexualized and everything. But actually original idea, of art, especially in Hinduism and in Vedic art, was to really bring the awareness of the divine from deep within us. Because even sometimes if we look at a beautiful painting of the divine, beautiful deity, something awakens inside of us, something really different. And what is even, more fascinating is that, and this is something that I never really thought about it in that way until just recently, that if we think of this, whenever we are surrounded by something beautiful, even by nature, where there's so much beauty, actually we feel safe too. Like imagine being surrounded by dark, obscure space, with very cluttered. It feels a little spooky, but when you're surrounded by beautiful open space and there's some beauty around it, you immediately feel just different. And I think that Goddess Lakshmi kinda is trying to show us in her so many aspects how to really, how to say, embody the qualities of that beauty, live our lives in a beautiful way, and surround ourselves with healthy beauty, beauty that makes us feel safe, that makes us feel connected to ourselves and to the divine, rather than doing all those really weird things with beauty that we are doing those days. So,
Yes, and I mean, as you so wonderfully put, wealth is not just localized to material, right? There is just this spiritual wealth, the mental wealth, the whole aspect of living in this world. And another thing which I always like about, I mean, because the symbolism of lotus is often used in multiple ways, and I think it also signifies that no matter what our external circumstances are, right, there is always that chance to just bloom, with
yeah.
fragrance, with beauty. And I mean, a lot of us are always external looking at, right, if only this circumstance was changed or this person was changed, I could be so much better. But then there is this example of a lotus, which is, I mean, in any muddy water you can see it blooming. uh, so there is,
Mm.
there's tons of stuff to gain from here, but as we move forward, Achala,
Absolutely.
since your own expertise also lies in Vedic astrology, uh,
Mm.
what does where do Sri Lakshmi, Goddess Lakshmi, and Vedic astrology, how do they merge, and what does this tell us about her?
This is actually very dear to my heart topic, I would say, because so many times when people come to me for Vedic astrology reading, and it's very natural that, of course, when one comes to Vedic astrology reading, one also looks for some form of guidance when it comes to one's spiritual path, especially when people don't have a guru. It's astrology is almost like a little guru, we could say. And very often, actually, especially as one of the first practices, I end up recommending people to learn how to meditate with Goddess Lakshmi. And I have also a couple of recorded guided meditations on that. But the reason why I do that is because the thing is with Goddess Lakshmi, if we look at her, first and foremost, she's the most associated with planet Venus in our birth chart. And if we would go back to actually very Bible of Vedic astrology, which is Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, there is this classification of which planet stands for what exactly. And it's so nicely described that, which is very interesting because people often have this question why there is always some problem with some transit in the sky. So hear me out, it will become more clear now. So we have 9 planets, Navagrahas, in Vedic astrology. Out of those 9 planets, 5 are always cruel, which means their predisposition is to transform you. They're not interested in you being actually happy. They just want to burn your karma. Then 4 of them are kind of benevolent. Now, out of those 4, 2 of them are benevolent only if they are in the right mood. That's Moon and Mercury. So we are left with 2 planets, Jupiter and Venus. And out of those 2, even Sage Parashara actually attributes Venus as being more, how to say, of a giver of happiness in our lives. Because Jupiter is still a guru, he wants to teach us. While Venus is this planet of pure joy and happiness, this flow and connection and love in life. So normally when Venus is well placed in life, then we will feel that. It's not that just our material desires will be fulfilled, but we'll feel actual joy and love and happiness and connection to people around us, compassion and empathy as well. But when Venus is ill placed, that will be missing. And as a result of that, what often happens, we kind of shrink a little bit, we shut down a little bit and withdraw. Because Venus also, as well as Goddess Lakshmi, is so connected to our heart chakra itself. So when we start shrinking, then of course also the way we look at the world around us starts shrinking as well. And our whole destiny also starts shrinking a little bit. It can't really unfold so smoothly. So whenever there is any issue with either Venus or even Moon in a birth chart, because 2 of those planets represent our, let's say, emotional well-being in life, then very often we when they are afflicted, we love softness, these feminine qualities. And softness is also something that is unfortunately not very popular in our world. We are actually taught to be always mobilized, strong, fight for what we want, motivated like 100% of the time, ideally, and to never feel tired, never rest. So we kind of really forgotten, many of us, especially those in modern world, with modern careers, how to just slow down a little and connect to yourself. Be kind to yourself first. Because oftentimes, unfortunately, we are the ones who are the most unkind to ourselves. And Goddess Lakshmi, especially when we kind of visualize her, when we meditate upon her, and the simple meditation that anyone can do who is watching this podcast, literally just even, just for 2 minutes a day, just visualize her sitting in your heart. That's it. It's very simple and anyone can do that. But even, when you visualize her in her form, how soft is her smile, how relaxed are her facial muscles as well, because ours are so tense sometimes, we also relax a little bit and we allow ourselves to be a little bit more in the moment. And we connect a little bit with this core of ourselves, just a little bit more. This is why I so often recommend, to people who come to me for Vedic astrology reading to please connect to Lakshmi, especially if there is affliction to Moon or Venus in your birth chart. But even other planets can benefit from that too, because Goddess Lakshmi is compared to the Moon in the Sri Suktam, but also to the Sun. And she has 2 elephants on both her sides, which of course represent the influence of Jupiter. So if you actually pray to this aspect of Divine Mother, she can help to kind of really the most auspicious parts, of your destiny to manifest in your life, so that you don't need to feel this constant struggle and constant need to battle, but so you can feel a little bit more of this effortlessness that I'm taken care of, and even if I relax, world will continue turning and I will not miss out anything. I can just rest for a moment. It's all fine. And I think that this is this beautiful, reassuring energy of Divine Mother that so many people need nowadays.
I mean, just out of curiosity, you mentioned in Vedic astrology, if you see people within, how do you call it, afflicted Venus, and one of the things which you recommend is simply meditate on the goddess. And I mean, hopefully towards the end of the session, we'll just talk briefly more about meditations. But are there any other things which you tell them, or is it just that, okay, this period is something which you have to sort of take care of, and then things will improve?
Actually, usually I also recommend to people a lot some very simple, I would call them neuro-exercises for establishing on a more, let's say, biological level, a feeling of safety within themselves and in their bodies. Because of course, external circumstances which are around us and which come from our karma are not always in our hands. And in fact, most of the things are out of our hands. So what we can do is to actually make sure that when a difficult period comes, we have enough resources to meet that. So I often say, that Vedic astrology is a little bit like weather forecast, When you know that rain is coming, you can't do much about it. It will still come, but you can take umbrella with you, right? So you don't get wet at least. So whenever I see, that there is some form of, affliction to the inner self happening, person will not feel, so well, then we can help actually with resourcing, with learning, some techniques that actually help people feel better. And this is one thing that is my great area of interest as well, apart from Vedic astrology, which is the neuroscience, the applied neuroscience, the polyvagal theory, and all these, let's say, new discoveries through which we can learn how to be in our bodies and feel everything that we need to feel at the moment and not be overwhelmed by it at the same time. Because that in itself, very often, if we just manage to restore this sense of safety to the body, then sometimes we can even avert physical illnesses to come. And that's a huge thing, actually. So
A quick follow-up question, something you mentioned is that to feel safe within our body, how does one do that? I mean, it seems to be the primary problem which most people have, that the mind is in a chaos,
yeah.
and there are problems, but we are making them perpetually more worse by keeping on, right, imagining worst case scenarios and building up stories and more on that.
Yeah.
So how does one feel safe in the midst of a chaos?
That's a very good question. And it's actually, I think, a great topic for like a entire, nice separate discussion, because I can get really passionate about it. but to put it simply, in simple words, how does one feel safe in their bodies? We need to ask the question why we don't feel safe in the first place. And because if we, for example, look at nature, look at any little animal out there. I'm living here in Mauritius, so I see lots of little animals here and there, mongooses and monkeys, etc. You look at them, they never have that problem. They never have problem with not feeling safe in their bodies. When they perceive threat around them, they get mobilized. But the moment threat is gone, they are relaxed again. So it's not, let's say, the goal is not to avoid having the threat response, because we need it sometimes, objectively. Sometimes it's actually necessary for real life survival. But very, very often it's not, like that it must be used so much. And the thing is that we kind of get stuck in those states. And why we get stuck? Because there were some situations in our past, and this is usually early childhood experience, that were, to put it in simple words, out of our window of tolerance. So like if, let's say, our window of tolerance is like this, wave is like this, the situation that came was outside of it. It was like this. And we're just like, whoa, I don't know how to handle that. So if something like that happened, or if there were multiple situations that happened along those lines, and most of us living in modern times, we experience this in some form, then naturally we become more vigilant. And this is something that actually, how to say, we don't even do it consciously. It's almost like our nervous system is doing it like, let me be a little bit more careful. Let me be, let me see the threat a little bit more so that I can be prepared more, so that I can be safe more. But as a result of that, of those experiences, we actually kind of often disassociate almost a little bit from our bodies. We're not so much present in them. And of course, the very fact that on top of this, which is a very natural process to happen, also all of us are continuously, surrounded by all these media, all the screens all the time. I mean, there's a beautiful aspect to that, of course, because we can have this podcast because of that. But it doesn't help in staying in the body, actually. And very often relearning how to feel safe in the body begins with something as simple as just bringing awareness back to our breath, or maybe you can even feel your heartbeat, or how about your hands? Like we always just take these hands for granted, but just imagine, that you see those hands for the very first time in your life and look at them with the same level of curiosity. And you see that like, wow, like you feel it differently. You feel your body differently. So actually bringing curiosity back into whatever our body experiences, even if it's a little pain in the back, or maybe if it's some soft feeling in the heart, whatever the feeling is, just bring curiosity back to the body without judgment. And I think that this is like the first baby step in that direction. But for many people, that very step itself can be really crucial, actually, because without this step, even if we sometimes take some meditation techniques or even mindfulness techniques, sometimes for some people it can make it worse. For people, for example, who have like severe traumas, because for them, mindfulness will be just like a more fancy way to disassociate, basically speaking. So it's not like one size fit all in this case.
It's a wonderful topic, and I can see you're very passionate about it. But I think it's a longer discussion which we'll take in a separate session.
Absolutely.
But I think these small practical tips which you mentioned are really important, just to get that anchor somewhere, and then you can decide your next course of action. But if you're just flailing around or floating aimlessly, it just gets that much more difficult to get back to anything.
Absolutely. And the thing is that we are very used to just kind of give priority to only one stream of perception from our brain, which is the top down, basically speaking. So just the thinking, right? We just kind of put that in our awareness most of the time. But how fascinating it is sometimes to kind of get out of it and just see what comes as a pure bodily sensation, more implicit in nature, that doesn't need any words whatsoever, that just comes from deep within.
Absolutely, and I think I'll note down these points for the next session, because and I think that they're really important. And I mean, you mentioned something about the screens as well. These are all subtopics which are taking up so much of our day, and which I think somehow lead back to our original topic, which was why everything is about material wealth. I mean, there is so much of
Yeah.
different dimensions to consider. But moving on, Ashlaji, to our the central theme, the Sri Suktam. Uh, could you give us, I mean, an overview of both the origin, the understanding, the mythology, and what is contained in it?
So Sri Suktam is a sukta or a hymn to Goddess Sri or Lakshmi. And it can be actually found in the appendices to Rig Veda, which are the Kilani hymns. And like original structure of Sri Suktam is actually exactly 16 verses which is same like 16 lunar phases. So it's somehow really significant in that way as well. And every verse has its own, let's say, aspect of Goddess Lakshmi presiding over it, even a special sage or seer who is believed to actually given that particular verse, even a particular Bij mantra in some traditions. So it's actually quite deep. And one thing that I personally never really thought of that way until I came across the Pancharatra scripture called Lakshmi Tantra, which is basically like a conversation between Goddess Lakshmi and Indra. So Indra, who is a great devotee of Goddess Lakshmi, by the way, so Indra is actually questioning Goddess Lakshmi on various topics. And it's very beautiful because then Goddess replies, but she basically talks about herself. So it's like a very beautiful and quite profound scripture. And then there can be found this chapter on Sri Suktam itself, where Goddess Lakshmi explains that actually Sri Suktam is not just a collection of these 16 verses, but within Sri Suktam itself, my 53 names are encoded. So she says, when you, for example, chant the very beginning of Sri Suktam, Om Hiranyavarnam Harinim Suvarna Rajatasrajam, she says, you can find my names there, and they can be also used like a mantra. She says, you can also chant mantra Om Hiranyavarnaya Namaha. That's the first of the 53 names of Goddess Lakshmi. And what is like a really beautiful part of it is that then she actually goes on describing the deeper meaning of each of those names. So she says, I am Hiranyavarna, not because I give wealth or prosperity, but because when you are in deep meditation and you see the light in your heart chakra, this light of your consciousness, that's what I am. That's why even on Diwali, which is a day sacred to Goddess Lakshmi, we light the lamps, which is this beautiful way to symbolize the defeat of light over darkness as well. Defeat of light, of true consciousness over the darkness of our own ignorance too. Then she goes on explaining her other names, which some of them are really beautiful. One of her names is, like I mentioned before, Ardra, the moist one. The goddess describes, it's because I am always moist with mercy for my devotees. I am ever merciful. One of her names is Chandra, which is like the moon. And she says that this is because when there is this pure consciousness that arises in a person after the consciousness is already still, after the great churning has been done in our sadhana, this pure consciousness that arises, as a result, it's also me. She also says, I am seated on a lotus because I'm seated in the lotuses of your chakras. And it's so beautiful, like when you read all of that, you suddenly discover that, wow, there's this entire esoteric yogic dimension actually to Lakshmi. And I strongly, recommend everyone to just read that description. I even made a short ebook just out of, these 53 names because I found it so beautiful for everyone to just know about and see this deeper dimension of Lakshmi herself.
Perfect. And I mean, if you have that ebook available, we'll link it in the description. But it's so wonderful listening to these names. And if I may request, can you speak about a few more names, just which are closer to your own heart?
Absolutely. There are lots of really interesting names of Goddess Lakshmi, which are also, how to say, less obvious sometimes. Like one of her names is Anapagamini. And literally, it actually means the one who always flows near. And actually, in this description of Sri Sukta, Goddess Lakshmi gave this, narrated this entire story, how for the sake of one sage, who was her devotee, she took a form of a river. But in itself, I find this name, so beautiful, Anapagamini, the one who always flows near, because it feels to me like, this very stream of bliss is actually so close to us. It's really not something that is very far, because sometimes when we hear about those ideas like bliss and effortlessness, and then we look at our very stressed and busy lives, it may feel like a very, very distant idea. But it's actually not. Even returning ourselves to this state of like safety and feeling loved and connected, it's not far, it's actually always close. And the same way Divine Mother says, I'm always flowing near. You just need to tap, into that flow and connect with me. But I am always there for you. And another of her names is Manasa Kama Akuti. Manasa Kama, the one who always fulfills the deepest desires of our mind, which kind of comes back to what you were saying, Deepakji, that sometimes we try to tell God how he should fulfill our desires or how he should do his job, which would be kind of similar, to entering a plane and telling a pilot how exactly should he fly, right? We would never do that. This would feel rude, right? But I think that because we, especially in our day and age, we kind of, how to say, we almost objectified God, to some extent. God became some energy, an energy you can use and abuse, and it feels very, compelling idea. God is not a person for us anymore, whom you would not necessarily behave like that. So we actually treat God worse than some humans around us. And this is fascinating because Goddess herself says here that I am called Manasa Kama because I am fulfilling all desires of your mind, but not just that. I am that very desire that appears in your mind. That's me. So you don't need to tell me about it. I am that very desire. I am that very force that actually has put this desire in your mind in the first place. So there is no need for you to tell me about it. I know about it. And it will come to fruition when the time is right. And when we are ripe, of course, and ready. So from that perspective, it's always fascinating to contemplate upon that and really see where we are ourselves in the relationship with the divine. Do we consider the divine being really far, or close and near? Do we actually perceive God honestly, genuinely as actually loving? Or is there some fear and some insecurity, somewhere at the back of our head, like, will he really fulfill my desire? Or maybe not, because I'm an evil person, for example, right? Or because I didn't do this or that so well. Because we are transactional in nature, so we project the same on God, of course. And we think that that's the way things work. But sometimes really all it takes is to just acknowledge that, yes, even that very desire, that very thought that appears in our mind, that is also her manifestation. And she knows that.
Something you mentioned is that we actually treat gods worse than humans, and uh, something came to my mind because I mean it's actually true that we change gods more often than we change friends, and even I
That's
mean
true.
even if we have a really toxic relative and somebody who's always criticizing, we won't be changing that relative, but we'll be shifting gods pretty faster. Uh, the other thing which you mentioned is, and I think that is very important to understand the thinking behind the names or these subtle aspects. And too often people actually do remark that we don't have time for this all, right? We are already so muddled up. But what I think they are missing is that this entire understanding of these subtle points is what gives the strength. This is what will
Yes.
give you the anchor to stay on your path and really force. I mean, even if the time is bad, and it's I mean there are definitely bad things which happen in the world, the sense of safety and the sense that it will become all right, and or even right, it is something which is happening and I don't need to add on more suffering onto it. That strength will only come if you have sort of gone through this path of understanding these subtle points. And when the goddess says I
It's
am near, what does that really mean, right? If I mean I am near, and this is something you mentioned was we don't trust whether we have done enough to get her grace. Perhaps we don't even trust that, or we don't even really believe that we are talking to her. It's just sort of a social custom which is like, okay, on this day you have to do this, and
yeah, it's like when you have a small talk, a little conversation with someone, but you're not really there.
you're not really there.
Yeah.
Exactly. And even if you're there, it's more on the right fear based kind of thing that, okay, if I don't do this, what will happen? uh, so with that background, Ashlaji, how should one actually I mean either recite or what is the methodology of involving oneself with the Sri Suktam? Is there a recommended method? How does one go about that?
Actually, in the Lakshmi Tantra, Goddess Lakshmi herself says that there is no really a prerequisite to chant it. Just the thing is that for people who are not familiar with Vedic chanting, it may take a little bit of time to actually learn it because there are lots of new words, and there's a specific rhythm. So we don't just chant with any intonation that we like. There's a specific rhythm that must be kept as well. And this is actually precisely why I found this part of Lakshmi Tantra so beautiful, because Goddess there herself basically says to her children, look, I know you don't have time to learn all of this. You're very, very busy. It's difficult to learn, the Vedic hymn. But what you can do at least, which takes far less time and can be done without even proper intonation, you just take these 53 names and just recite them. That's it. You'll have a very similar result, actually. You will also still connect with her in that way. And I really loved, how beautifully you kind of explained that these type of practices, they give us some form of like spiritual anchor. And what I like to call, they just grow our capacity to really, experience life with all its ups and downs, but in a different way. Because the very reason why sometimes, people say, oh, I don't have time to meditate, I'm so stressed out. It's not true they don't have time. They don't have capacity at the moment, because it's like imagine that their whole life or mind is like big aquarium, and there's just so many fish inside that you try to squeeze something else inside. It's impossible. It's not there. So what you can do is to try to remove some fish, and meditation and mindfulness can be helpful in that for sure. But even better, just get bigger aquarium. And this is what really the expansion of consciousness is about. Like, let's just get bigger aquarium so that all these things that I already experience now, so I don't need to be overwhelmed by them. It's like somebody, I don't remember which meditation teacher said that, but I find it so accurate. He said, if you don't have time to meditate 5 minutes a day, then you should meditate 1 hour a day. And this is very accurate because it already means that your life probably is a little bit, off balance, basically speaking, if you can't even find these 5 minutes. So you should really invest more time in just being, anchoring this sense of safety. And actually, one of the best ways to anchor that, especially when we pray or when we chant Sri Suktam or any prayer, really, even the prayer that just comes in our own spontaneous words from our heart. And that's something beautiful that my Gurudev also said and stressed quite a lot recently, is that when you pray to God, of course, you can also look at the deity in the outside. That's beautiful. But he said, even more important than that is you must feel seen by the divine. It's more important than you seeing the divine. Because actually, we humans, when we feel seen, we feel safe. Actually, when we really feel truly seen, that's how our entire nervous system is wired. That's why people who survived trauma, but if there was like at least one fairly empathic person next to them who actually saw them go through that, they will recover faster. That's how miraculous it is, that, which is fascinating, to think about, that just one person is enough. Just one person who truly sees us. That's how all therapeutic relationships work as well. Because it's just about that, about feeling seen. And when we are on spiritual path, we can feel seen by the divine anywhere, because he's Jagannath, right? His eyes are big and they are really everywhere. He's from all sides, or she's from all sides. All it takes from us is just to really like connect to that reality, really, that which is always like flowing near, right? Like connect to that reality that you are always seen, you are never alone. And it's such a simple thing, almost a cliche, but it really does change the way our spiritual path can unfold and how we can perceive life. Because then even if you go through a difficult thing in life or a challenge, which you'll certainly do, because everybody goes through those things eventually, but you're not alone. You feel seen, and that really can change everything.
It's such a beautiful statement, and I actually never heard of it before, and I never thought of it. But I mean, it's so true that we are going to various temples and doing right different texts and different retreats, and all of that is in the purpose of seeing the divine. But do I feel I am being seen? And it's such a shift in the entire thing, because if I believe I'm being seen, everything changes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I mean, it's almost a shortcut to where I want to be. And if I don't feel I'm being seen, why is that? Do I not have faith in myself? Do I not have faith in what I'm doing, or am I actually doing something wrong? It's really something to ponder upon. Am I feeling seen? Really wonderful statement.
It's beautiful. That's actually what my Gurudev Paramahansa Viswananda said, that this is a true meaning of darshana. Actually, even when we go to temple, he says it's not really about you seeing the deity, because again, our eyes, they're not lotus eyes, they're not always very pure, but it's about really the deity seeing you.
We often go to long lines in temples, and right, we jump over somebody and just to see the
Yes.
form, right? And it might lead you to question, okay, I saw the form, but was I seen? And if I was
Yeah.
not seen, does the goddess really need me to stand in front of her to be seen?
That's a good question, and especially when I jump in front of another person, when I cut the line in the temple, do I feel seen then? Because I'm sure we would not do that if we would feel seen.
Yeah, I mean, precisely. I mean, it seems that right, getting a more VIP entry is the only way to be seen, but is it?
Yeah.
So nice, Ashlaji. Such a different context you have given to this conversation, and I think we touched about some parts before, but before we end, and also in the context of the upcoming Navratris and Diwali, would you tell both as to how to worship the goddess as well as how to meditate on the goddess, both of which you have touched a little bit, but in the closing comments, could you just describe once more how to actually, and when I say worship, I'm more in the forms of the external way of worship, and meditate obviously, and how to meditate on the goddess.
This is actually so beautiful because there are so many ways to connect to Divine Mother. She's actually so merciful that she gave us really so many ways and so many opportunities. And actually, one really beautiful way to connect to Divine Mother and also to Goddess Lakshmi is externally, for example, through meditation or painting or even worship of Sri Yantra itself, because that's also her representation. And this is actually one of the most profound ways for me personally, to connect to the Divine Mother, either through Sri Yantra Puja or even through painting Sri Yantra, because it really changes something, in the heart. It takes time, but it's a really beautiful way to connect with her. But when it comes to, internally connecting to Divine Mother, I always loved a lot this like super simple meditation that my Gurudev gave once, also during Navaratri. And he basically speaking said, just visualize yourself as being very small and sitting in the lap of the Divine Mother. And you can make her look exactly how you want her to look like. She can even look like your earthly mother if that's what you connect most with. But the trick here is to really feel yourself like this small child who depends fully 100% on the mother. So you depend fully on her. You know that she'll provide everything. And you can also speak to her about anything without fear or shame. You can feel seen by her without fear of shame as well, because you are her child. There's nothing really to be afraid there. And I think that this is like one really key thing that my Gurudev kept repeating throughout the Navaratris, throughout the year. That, of course, ritualistic side of it we can experience, I think, in the most powerful way, when we actually go to the temples, we have their grand celebrations and then kirtan and actually singing and praising her glory in so many ways. And that's, I think, why Navaratri is so compelling, actually, festival to many, because there is music, there is dance, there is so many ways to experience her. But my Guruji always used to say that, it's the most important at the end of the day, like how sincere we are in our hearts, and to remember that she's the mother. There doesn't need to be any fear. And even if we do very little and we do it from our heart, she will respond to that always. Whatever resonates with us more. Some people prefer to chant the mantra, some love to sing, some prefer to meditate. And of course, our external circumstances limit us too. But however we choose to serve her, however we choose to actually honor her, she's definitely going to be there. And maybe to kind of encourage that, for the end, I think it's a nice story to hear for people. It happened to me on one Navaratri in quite a few years back. I would say maybe like 10 years back, something like that. So I used to live in Europe, and always I would go to Navaratri, to the ashram of my Gurudev in Germany, like every year. But there was this one year when I didn't went for celebrations because later that year we were going to India with my husband. So I was like, okay, this year we will not be going to ashram. We will do our little Navaratri at home. So we were doing really just a very simple puja, to Devi every day. And there is this fourth day of Navaratri, which traditionally is sacred to Devi Kushmanda. And actually, Devi Kushmanda, one of the offerings that is dearest to her is pumpkin. And usually in the ashram of my Gurudev, I remember they would always make pumpkin soup on that day. So that year when I didn't went to ashram, I just asked my husband, you know what, let's do the pumpkin soup today. Let's offer it to the Divine Mother. And then something really, crazy and mind-blowing happened. So my husband was ready to get out, to go to shop and get the pumpkin. He is opening our entrance door, and on the other side of entrance door, on the handle, there is a plastic bag with pumpkin. And I have no explanation for that, because there were many apartments in the building in which I was living. So there's no explanation why this happened. There was just their pumpkin waiting for us. But for me, it was, such a beautiful confirmation that really Divine Mother is so close to us. Like we just don't know, in which form her blessing will come, in which form she will reassure us that she is here. But if we have just this tiny little bit of faith, I think that it's very easy to please her because she is the mother, She has very soft heart for her children.
Such a wonderful story to end on, Achala Ji. I mean, it was apart from this being a wonderfully informative session, I really enjoyed it.
I'm grateful to hear that.
And thank you so much for again sharing your wisdom. I do appreciate you coming at it from different angles, and especially the few things which you introduced today, both on the side of neuroscience as well as the practical aspects, as well as consciousness themes, which I really appreciate. Even apart from this, and hopefully we'll have a longer session on all of those. But understanding the goddess, we did it in the last session as well as in this session with you. It's a whole different journey talking to you, and thank you again so much for taking the
Thank
time
you so much.
and sharing all that you know with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deepak Ji, for inviting me. Always a pleasure.